Welcome to the ACLU of San Diego and Imperial County's ACLU-SDIC Immigrants' Rights Know Your Rights training. During this presentation, we'll cover your rights when encountering law enforcement, such as immigration and customs enforcement, customs and border protection, and the police while living in a border community. Please note that this information is not intended to be legal advice. Every person's situation is different. You should have a private conversation with an attorney if you need advice or have specific legal questions. While we may assist in civil rights matters, we may not be able to answer your legal questions today. We highly encourage you to speak with an immigration attorney for case-specific immigration questions. Today we will be covering the ACLU, your basic rights guaranteed by the Constitution of the United States, law enforcement agencies, your rights, encounters with each law enforcement agency, immigration raids, detention and family preparedness, and finally, Know Your Rights supplemental resources. First, we would like to provide a brief overview of the ACLU and the rights it protects. The ACLU defends rights enshrined in the U.S. Constitution and focuses on education, litigation, and advocacy. Litigation is when we take legal action or dispute a case in court. A lawsuit may be against either governmental or non-governmental organizations. Advocacy is the public support of a cause or policy. The ACLU-SDIC specifically focuses on the counties of San Diego, Imperial, and surrounding regions. We have two offices, one in San Diego and one in El Centro. At the ACLU-SDIC, we focus on advancing justice, immigrants' rights, and racial and economic justice. The ACLU also remains a defender of segments of the population who have traditionally been denied their rights, with much of our work today focused on equality for people of color, women, LGBTQ+ people, people who are incarcerated, immigrants, and people with disabilities. Now let's discuss your basic rights when encountering law enforcement. To be clear, the Fourth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution protects everybody against unlawful searches and seizures of people and their property, regardless of their lawful or unlawful status. It protects us from warrantless searches. Regardless of a person's immigration status, law enforcement officers may not perform searches nor detain people based on religion, political beliefs, national origin, sexual orientation, gender expression, or race or ethnicity. You can ask law enforcement agents the reason why you are being detained or questioned. These rights apply everywhere within the U.S., including at borders. Some of the civil rights guaranteed in the U.S. Constitution that apply to everyone, regardless of immigration status, include the right to be treated fairly in court, the right to free speech, the right to religious freedom, the right to remain silent, and the right to legal counsel in criminal cases. Regardless of citizenship status, these rights are guaranteed to everyone. Please note that while we are entitled to legal counsel in criminal cases, we are not entitled to an attorney in immigration matters. While we can hire an immigration attorney, one will not be appointed to us if we can't afford one, unlike in criminal cases. In any interaction with law enforcement, remember these three phrases. Am I free to go? I do not consent to a search. I am going to remain silent. I want to talk to an attorney. These phrases are the most straightforward way for you to exercise your rights. They're short and simple, and if you are in a scary situation, a 4 or 5 word sentence might be all you are able to get out. We will go into detail about each phrase in the upcoming slides. In any interaction with law enforcement, ask, am I free to go? If they say yes, leave calmly. If they get in your way or keep asking you questions, you may ask again. If they say no or a reasonable person would not feel free to end the encounter, then you are being detained. Ask why you are being detained by asking, can you tell me why you were stopping me? Remember the phrase, I do not consent to a search. If officers or agents do not have a warrant to search you or your property, you may verbally refuse if you are asked to consent to a search of you or your property. Shaking your head or bodily gestures can be misunderstood by the police, and a court might not see it as a denial. If you physically resist, you could be charged with assaulting an officer. Instead, repeat that you do not consent to any searches. Any search you consent to is a legal search. If you want to deny consent, you must do so clearly and irrefutably. Saying, I do not consent to a search loudly enough for people around you to hear could be important in case you need witnesses later. However, officers do not need your consent to search if contraband is in plain view. They cannot search closed backpacks and bags without consent or probable cause. You have the right to remain silent. If you wish to exercise your right to remain silent, say so out loud. In some states, you may be required to provide your name if asked to identify yourself, and an officer may arrest you for refusing to do so. If you are stopped, you should just say, "I am going to remain silent." If you are arrested, say, "I am going to remain silent and I want to speak with a lawyer." State this right when you are stopped or if you are asked questions that you feel are not in your best interest to answer. Be clear in your invocation. Do not say, "I think" or "maybe." After you invoke the right to remain silent, you must remain silent, or you risk waiving this right. Note that in police stops and arrests, not immigration, officers are required to read you your Miranda rights. Miranda rights include informing you that you are being arrested and that you have the right to remain silent, and an attorney may be appointed to you. Immigration officials are not required to read your Miranda rights. An attorney is also not appointed to you in arrest by immigration officials. You have to retain your own lawyer. As a general disclaimer, you cannot assume officers will behave in a way that protects your safety or respects your rights even after you assert them. You can, however, try to assert your rights and challenge violations to your rights if you remember to assert your rights by asking, "Am I free to go?" "I do not consent to a search," and "I am going to remain silent. I want to talk to an attorney." You may have to repeat yourself if approached again by the same or a new officer. Now let's discuss the different law enforcement agencies that are in San Diego County, Imperial County, and surrounding areas. The law enforcement agencies that surround us are listed on this slide. Think of them as separated into two buckets. The first bucket of immigration handles national security and local protection agencies and falls under the Department of Homeland Security, DHS. The agencies include Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, known as ICE, Homeland Security Investigations, HSI, Enforcement and Removal Operations, ERO, Customs and Border Protection, known as CBP, and Border Patrol, USBP or BP. The second bucket is local law enforcement agencies, which includes local police departments such as the San Diego Police Department and the El Centro Police Department, and the Sheriff's Department such as San Diego County Sheriff's Department and the Imperial County Sheriff's Department. It is important to understand some basic functions or jurisdiction of each agency so that you know what their legal limits are, how to interact with them, and to document accurate information. ICE generally performs their duty everywhere that Customs and Border Protection and Border Patrol are not active. CBP are usually at U.S. ports of entry and within 100 miles of the border. We'll talk a bit more about this in a minute. BP are the roving mobile units of CBP that go beyond the immediate border, up to the 100-mile boundary. HSI conducts federal criminal investigations and typically serves on joint task forces with local and state law enforcement agencies. ERO conducts arrests and removal and may be some of the immigration agents who go to people's houses. Local police departments enforce both traffic and criminal laws within their municipality or city. The Sheriff's Department has county jurisdiction to enforce both traffic and criminal violations. Other law enforcement agencies that may not play as critical a role in immigration include DEI, FBI, California Highway Patrol, CHP, and San Diego Unified School Police. Also, the California Values Act, SB 54, is a state law that ensures state and local police resources are not used to enforce federal immigration laws. This means, for example, that local police making a routine traffic stop for a broken turn signal may not contact ICE if they suspect the driver may be an undocumented immigrant. To help you visually identify the different agencies, here are some corresponding insignia for the Department of Homeland Security, or DHS agencies we'll be discussing today: ICE, CBP, BP, HSI, and ERO. It's important to understand the basic differences in these agencies because they have different duties, things they must or can do, and things they are not permitted to do. It is important to be able to identify each agency so that you will know how to exercise your rights accordingly. Finally, because sometimes officials show up in plain clothing, you will have to ask what agency they are affiliated with. Recognizing each agency is also important for documentation, especially in a court of law. We just reviewed some of the DHS agencies to be aware of. Now, we'll review some of the local law enforcement agencies in our regions in San Diego and Imperial counties, including police departments and the two sheriff's departments. In San Diego County, we have the San Diego County Sheriff's Department and the San Diego Police Department. In Imperial County, we have the Imperial County Sheriff's Department and the El Centro Police Department. There are several other police departments in each county that we did not include here, but some folks may live in a city with a different police department not listed here. Now that we know about the different DHS and local law enforcement agencies, We're going to talk more about what your rights are when you encounter each law enforcement agency. First, here are some key terms that play an important role when you encounter any law enforcement agency. It is illegal for agents to use the color of your skin or the language you speak as cause for an arrest. All law enforcement agencies need to meet the adequate level of suspicion to stop you for a prolonged period, search you or your belongings, and arrest you. Two very important standards are reasonable suspicion and probable cause. On the left side, we see that sheriffs and police need reasonable suspicion, facts that create a reasonable belief, a little more than a hunch, that you're committing or have committed a crime to temporarily stop you. Meanwhile, immigration agents must have facts that create a reasonable belief, a little more than a hunch, that you're committing or have committed a violation of immigration law to temporarily stop you. For example, immigration officials should not stop you only on the basis of the color of your skin. A prolonged stop or detention where you are not free to leave, you or your vehicle are blocked from leaving, or where an officer grabs you or holds you down and does not allow you to leave, requires the officer to have a higher standard of suspicion. An arrest requires the officer to have probable cause, a belief based on individualized facts or evidence that you committed a crime. On the right side, we see the sheriffs and police must have facts that make it probable that you are committing or have committed a crime. For example, if an officer sees you steal something, they have the adequate amount of suspicion and facts to stop and arrest you. Similarly, immigration agents must have facts that make it probable that you are committing or have committed a violation of immigration or federal law to arrest you. They must have facts that you have unlawful status. For example, if during the stop you mention that you are undocumented, the agent can arrest you. That's why it is important to remember I choose to remain silent. These required standards ensure that people are not searched or seized because of the color of their skin, national origin, or language they speak. Because stops and arrests that don't meet the right standards can be challenged, asking officers why am I being stopped or why am I being arrested can help a lawyer or a court identify violations of your rights. Regardless of immigration status, you have the right to remain silent, which means you are not required to answer any questions or sign any documents until you are able to speak with an attorney. Officers may not use excessive, unreasonable, or unnecessary force against you. It's important to note that you might be subject to a lengthy detention for further investigation if you do not answer all questions, but admitting to being a foreign national or undocumented might have more detrimental consequences. If you are stopped in your vehicle by sheriffs or police, stop the car as safely and quickly as possible. Turn off the car, turn on the internal light, partially open the window, and place your hands on the steering wheel. You may ask, why am I being stopped? You have rights in those situations. Drivers and passengers have the right to remain silent. You do not have to answer questions about your citizenship status, your place of birth, or even your national origin. When asked, show your driver's license, registration, and proof of insurance. You do not have to consent to a search. You may say, I do not consent to a search, but if police believe your car contains evidence of a crime, they can search it. Drivers and passengers can ask, am I free to leave? If yes, silently leave. Police officers are not allowed to ask about immigration status. You do not have to answer questions about where you were born, whether you're a U.S. citizen, or how you entered the country. You have the right to remain silent. If you are arrested, police have to read you your Miranda rights, informing you that you have the right to remain silent and that you have the right to an attorney. You should tell the officers that you will not speak until your attorney is present. If you feel your rights have been violated, write down everything you remember, including officers' badges and patrol car numbers, which agency the officers were from, and any other details. Get contact information for witnesses. If you're injured, seek medical attention immediately and take photographs of your injuries. File a written complaint with the agency's Internal Affairs Division or Civilian Complaint Board. In most cases, you can file a complaint anonymously if you wish. Police are legally allowed to lie and use tactics to get you to give up your rights. Here are a few to keep in mind. Cops often read you your rights to remain silent and then proceed directly to asking you questions. They don't typically pause and say, okay, so having heard all that, do you want to waive your rights? If you don't have an opportunity to assert your rights because an officer continues speaking, you can calmly say, excuse me, I am going to remain silent. If you answer any of their questions and don't explicitly invoke your rights, that can count as a waiver. If you invoke the right to remain silent, remain silent. And it's important that you never sign anything without a lawyer present, unless it's a ticket. Signing a ticket may allow you to walk away with an infraction rather than being arrested. Now that we've reviewed your rights if you are stopped by police, let's discuss your rights when you encounter ICE. First, exercising your rights is not a reason for deportation. Exercising your rights may be helpful in certain situations. In fact, remember that ICE agents need probable cause to make an arrest. Probable cause means that the agent must have facts about you that make it probable that you are committing or committed a violation of immigration law or federal law. An ICE agent may ask you about your immigration status without cause or a warrant, but you are not compelled to answer their questions. If you don't speak English, you may request an interpreter. You have the right to remain silent, and you also should indicate that you will not answer any questions until your attorney is present. Because ICE agents have a practice of making what is called collateral arrests, it is best to exercise your right to remain silent. A collateral arrest occurs when an individual is arrested even though they were not the target of a law enforcement agency. This typically can occur when ICE is taking action against one person and they arrest people in their presence. For example, immigrants have been arrested while accompanying members to ICE check-ins, waiting with coworkers for rights to work, and being in the same home as an officer's target. We will discuss ICE raids in detail later in this presentation. Even in cases of collateral arrest, law enforcement still has to have probable cause that the person is in violation of immigration laws. Exercising your right to remain silent may help you not disclose information about citizenship and immigration status that can lead to an arrest. It is also recommended that you stay calm and do not run. Running away from ICE agents can be sufficient reason for ICE to arrest you. Even in the event that ICE enters your home, you can simply state, "I do not wish to answer your questions." Exercising your right to remain silent and to speak to an attorney may buy you some time to assess your legal options. Without a warrant, probable cause is needed for searches and arrests. ICE typically cannot search your belongings without consent or probable cause. If an agent asks you if they can search you or your belongings, you have the right to say no. State, "I do not consent to a search." If you say yes or otherwise consent to the search is legal. Additionally, they can search your belongings if evidence of a crime or contraband is in plain view. If you feel you or your belongings were unlawfully searched or you were wrongfully arrested, contact the ACLU. Remember that a lawful warrantless arrest requires probable cause or facts that make it probable you are committing or have committed a violation of federal law, whereas a brief stop only requires reasonable suspicion. This means that the agent must have facts about you that make it probable that you are not a U.S. citizen, and you are committing or committed a violation of immigration law or federal law. If you are stopped, ask the agent why they stopped you. Ask, "Am I free to go?" If you are not free to go, ask, "Why am I being detained?" If you are arrested, remember to say, "I am going to remain silent and I want to speak with my lawyer." Remain silent and do not sign anything without consulting with a lawyer. Let's discuss U.S. Customs and Border Protection, what they do, and what your rights are should you encounter CBP officers or Border Patrol. CBP officers and Border Patrol agents both work for the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency, but play different roles. CBP officers are tasked with working at ports of entry, inspecting individuals and goods that enter in the U.S. Border Patrol is the law enforcement arm of the U.S. CBP agency that is tasked with patrolling the U.S. border so that it can identify immigration violations and federal crimes. Customs and Border Protection argues that it has special authority within a reasonable distance from any external boundary of the United States, up to 100 miles away from any actual border crossing. Border Patrol agents are the agents typically administering the region surrounding ports of entry. Whether you are at the border or within the 100-mile border zone, your rights will vary. We will discuss possible situations and your rights when you encounter Border Patrol agents or CBP officers. When asked by a CBP officer or Border Patrol agent to present documentation, you should generally provide it if you have documentation. In California, U.S. citizens do not have to carry proof of citizenship. If you are over 18 and have valid immigration documents, such as a valid student visa, you should carry those documents. If an agent asks you to produce them, you should. If you are an immigrant without documents, you can decline a request. This may lead to more questions and possible detention. Remember that you still have a right to remain silent. State, "I am going to remain silent. I want to talk to an attorney." Never lie or provide false documents to immigration officials. Never carry fake documentation. Don't sign anything without consulting your lawyer. Border Patrol agents can stop you, question you, and possibly detain you within the 100-mile border zone to carry out their goal of identifying undocumented individuals. For reference, detaining you means that the agent or officer may briefly stop you if they have reasonable suspicion based on specific facts about you that create reasonable belief, a little more than a hunch, that you are committing or committed a violation of immigration law or federal law. Like arrests by other law enforcement agencies, an arrest typically needs to be based on probable cause. In other words, the agent must have facts about you that make it probable that you are committing or committed a violation of immigration law or federal law. At all times, you have the right to remain silent. You should state, "I am going to remain silent. I want to talk to an attorney." Remember that in immigration-related scenarios, you are not entitled to have an attorney assigned to you, but you may retain one and still assert your right to remain silent, speak with your attorney, and not sign anything without consulting your attorney. Border Patrol, roving patrols, or mobile units cannot pull you over to question occupants about their immigration status unless agents have a reasonable suspicion, more than a hunch, of an immigration violation. A prolonged stop requires probable cause, a reasonable belief based on the circumstances that an immigration violation or crime has likely occurred. Also, Border Patrol cannot pull you over to search your vehicle without your consent or probable cause. Again, law enforcement agencies may search your belongings if contraband is in plain view. Agents should always be able to explain the reason for a stop to the driver. If agents are unable to explain the reason, take note of identifying agent information and contact the ACLU as soon as possible. In California, it is illegal for Border Patrol to rely solely on the race or ethnicity of a driver or passenger to justify a stop. Even though Border Patrol needs reasonable suspicion to stop you or pull you over, there are permanent checkpoints in our region, including I-5 North in San Clemente, I-15 North near Temecula, I-8 West in Pine Valley, Highway 94 East near Jamul. At checkpoints, there are some considerable differences. You may be stopped, questioned about your immigration status, and even detained for a limited time to verify your status. Border Patrol may stop vehicles at certain checkpoints to do two things. 1. Ask a few limited questions to verify citizenship or immigration status of the vehicle's occupants. And 2. Visually inspect the exterior of a vehicle. Agents may send any vehicle to a secondary inspection area for the same purpose: brief questioning and visual inspection. Agents should not ask questions unrelated to verifying citizenship, nor can they hold you for an extended time without cause, even though you always have the right to remain silent. If you don't answer questions to establish your citizenship, officials may detain you longer to verify your immigration status. Border Patrol agents do have the right to enter private land without a warrant within 25 miles of the border. However, there are limitations. Agents may enter onto private land without a warrant within 25 miles of the border. Border Patrol cannot go onto private land more than 25 miles away from the border without a warrant or consent. Border Patrol should not cause physical damage to private property. Agents should not ask questions unrelated to verifying citizenship or immigration status, nor can they hold you for an extended time without cause. If you're questioned in this scenario, you may assert your right to remain silent. At customs, such as airports or ports of entry, there are stricter requirements, and individuals wishing to enter the U.S. have fewer rights than people within the U.S. Individuals may be questioned about citizenship, visa, green card status, items being brought into the country, purpose of trip, and length of stay. Also, federal authorities such as CBP officers can search your vehicle and all passenger belongings without a warrant, suspicion, probable cause, or consent. However, they should not ask about religious affiliation or political views. When interacting with sheriffs and police officers, you should remember, remain silent and calm. Follow orders, ask if you are free to go. Officers are not allowed to ask about immigration status. Drivers and passengers do not have consent to a search. Miranda rights will be read to you if you are arrested. You do have a right to an appointed attorney if you cannot afford one. When interacting with immigration officials including ICE, CBP, and Border Patrol outside the context of checkpoints and the border or points of entry, you may have to ask the officer to identify what agency they are with if they are in plain civilian clothing. Remain silent and calm. You may state that you will not answer questions without an attorney and then retain your own attorney. You do not have to answer questions about your immigration status. If you are a citizen or have lawful status, you may answer questions about your status and provide appropriate documentation to avoid being detained for a longer period. You are not entitled to have an attorney appointed to you. You are not entitled to be read your Miranda rights. Do not sign anything without consulting your attorney. Now that we've discussed your rights during individualized interactions with law enforcement, let's discuss what to do if immigration, such as ICE, is at your door. We'll also discuss group interactions or mass searches and seizures by immigration, also known as raids. In this segment, it is important to remember that we previously learned that the Fourth Amendment protects us from warrantless, unlawful searches and seizures. Usually, we can protect ourselves from raids or unwelcome interactions with immigration by remembering our rights. We are going to go over what our rights are and what we can do should we encounter ICE or Border Patrol in our homes, in public areas, or in privately owned business centers. As mentioned earlier, officers don't always appear in the uniform of the agency to which they belong. It is important to ask for a valid warrant and which agency they represent. Remember, all law enforcement agencies are required to have a signed judicial search warrant to enter your home. Inspect the search warrant to confirm that it is signed by a judge and that it identifies the address and the name of the person in your home to be arrested or the places and items that ICE wishes to inspect. In a few moments, we'll share an example of a valid judicial search warrant. But if they try to enter your home without a warrant, tell them they do not have permission to enter. Remember your right to remain silent and indicate that you will not answer questions without your attorney present. Be aware that ICE or immigration officers can detain other people who are not the target of their search, in what's called collateral arrests. Because ICE has been known to arrest multiple individuals in their homes, it is important not to open the door or invite officers into the home. Therefore, if immigration agents do have a valid arrest warrant for someone in your home, have only that person step outside and close the door behind them. Here are a couple of examples of warrants. Note that the proper warrant on the left comes from a court and is signed by a judge. Again, a warrant that does not have a judge's signature is not a valid warrant. You can refuse entry to immigration officials. The improper warrant on the right is signed by an agency representative, in this case ICE. A warrant for removal/deportation, Form I-205, does not allow officers to enter a location without consent. If you allow agents into your home that do not have a valid warrant, you have therefore consented, and the entry is then lawful. A search warrant that does not have your name on it may still be valid if it gives the correct address and description of the place the officers will be searching. An arrest warrant that does not have your name on it may still be validly used for your arrest if it describes you with enough detail to identify you. An arrest warrant alone does not allow entry into every location. However, they can enter your house without a warrant if they are chasing a suspect in hot pursuit, to provide emergency aid, if they reasonably believe evidence is going to be destroyed, or if evidence of a crime or contraband is in plain view. A search warrant allows police to enter the address listed on the warrant, but officers can only search the areas and for the items listed. Remember these key takeaways if you are home and there is a knock on the door. Do not open the door. ICE agents and immigration officers may pretend to be someone else. Talk to officers through a closed door. Ask for the agency they represent. Ask them to show ID through a window or peephole. Document the names and badge numbers. Ask the agent to slide the warrant under the door or show it through the window. Look to see if it has the correct name, address, and signature of the judge. If the warrant is not complete or not accurate, you should say that you do not consent to the search, but do not interfere if the officers decide to do the search. You must and should only let them in if they have a valid warrant. Because ICE has been known to make collateral arrests, arrest individuals who aren't their target, it is important not to open the door or invite officers into the home. If officers do not produce a warrant, keep the door closed. State, "I do not consent to your entry." If agents force their way in, do not resist or interfere. State, "I do not consent to your entry or search of these premises. I am exercising my right to remain silent. I won't answer any questions without a lawyer." Call your lawyer as soon as possible. Ask if you are allowed to watch the search. If you are allowed to, you should. Take notes, including names, badge numbers, which agency each officer is from, where they searched, and what they took. If others are present, have them act as witnesses to watch carefully what is happening. While we have more protection in our homes, it is important to know that immigration may have more flexibility in public areas, with some limitations. ICE may enter areas open to the general public. In California, SB 54 designates schools, hospitals, and courthouses as safe spaces where mass deportations should not be carried out. Unfortunately, ICE has been spotted near schools recently. Generally, immigration cannot search or enter non-public areas, such as private businesses, without a valid warrant signed by a judge. However, immigration officials may enter or search non-public areas, such as a business, if they have the property owner's consent. If you encounter immigration agents such as ICE or Border Patrol, do not run. They can use that as a reason to arrest you. Also, ICE and Border Patrol generally cannot search or seize records or documents without a valid search warrant signed by a judge or the owner's consent, or exigent circumstances such as a police chase. If ICE presents itself at a non-public area such as your business, a place of work, the owner of the property should inspect the search warrant to confirm that it is signed by a judge and that it identifies the places and items that ICE wishes to inspect. The owner of the property can refuse to consent to a search if ICE does not have a valid judicial warrant signed by a judge. Search or arrest warrants are for the person or area and require a judge's signature, and administrative subpoenas are those issued by a federal agency without judicial oversight. They are either a notice to appear in court or to produce certain documents. While these are not enforceable without a court order, they should be reviewed by an attorney. If you witness an arrest or raid, do not interfere. Comply with orders. Remember that you have the right to remain silent, you have the right to record in your own home, you have the right to record in public. This includes at vehicle stops, at checkpoints, streets, public transportation, etc. Note that CBP prohibits videotaping or recording anything on government property at a port of entry. If questioned, you may ask if you are free to go, and you can also indicate that you will not answer questions until your attorney is present. To ensure that you and your family are prepared should you be detained, we will now discuss what to expect if you are detained and how friends and family can prepare. First and most importantly, should you be detained, it is important to know your rights. And also, remember details of the agents and incident. Note the agent's name, badge number, or other identifying characteristics. Do not say or sign anything without speaking with a lawyer. If you are detained, you should also request to make a call to your family to share arrest details and where you are being detained, share your alien registration number or A number, ask them to find an attorney, and provide the attorney with this information. They should request representation through the San Diego County Immigrant Rights Legal Defense Program, IRLDP, and list out the phone number or way to contact them. We will share the Immigrant Rights Legal Defense Program phone number at the end of this presentation. Because we are used to telephone numbers stored in cell phones, it is important that you memorize the phone number of a reliable relative or friend because your cell phone will be confiscated. If you are taken to a detention center, you have the right to ask to speak to your consulate. Immigration officers will ask if you agree to self-deport. If you agree to self-deport, you give up the possibility for future relief. It is not a good idea to agree to self-deport because you give up the possibility for future relief. You may be asked multiple times to sign documents, including voluntary departure. You may refuse and may need to respond each time, "I want to speak to my attorney." Immigration officers will prepare documents with the immigration charges. Do not sign anything without reviewing it with an attorney. They may give you a court date if you are eligible. They will also determine if you are eligible for bond. Additionally, if you have a prior deportation order, you will be ineligible for bond. If you have a prior deportation order, speak to an attorney. It is also extremely important that you let immigration officials know if you have a fear of returning to your home country, as it may be your only chance to fight your case. Remember that you may be asked multiple times to sign voluntary departure, forms that will make you immediately deported. It is important that you state that you want to speak to your attorney every time. Because so much is at stake, if a loved one is detained, a prepared family has a much better chance of staying together. To be prepared, determine childcare, school arrangements and long-term plans, caregivers authorization forms. You can do so by completing the following steps. Determine caregivers, identify lead family members to activate the determined plan if someone is detained, create a financial plan, identify family, friend, or caregiver as point person for financial matters, prepare by completing forms, gathering documents, creating emergency contacts, put all important information in a binder or folder, and alert relevant family and friends of its location. Role play with children, and ensure that your finances, including your bank accounts, homes, vehicles, and/or businesses, will be managed in your absence. Be aware that a caregiver authorization form is different from power of attorney. The crucial difference is that power of attorney is for financial authorization, and the caregiver form is for childcare purposes and guardianship. Not only can you and your family prepare for worst-case scenario by doing the above, but memorizing your rights in each situation we discussed can potentially prevent detrimental impacts to your life after run-ins with law enforcement. You can get a detailed plan from the Immigrant Legal Resource Center website or link posted at the end of this presentation. You and your family should also contact your consulate to find out more about financial preparedness in your home country, obtaining up-to-date identity documents, and arrange naturalization of your U.S. family members if available in case you or a family member were to be deported. If you're detained, there are some things family and friends can do to help. For one, they should find out where the person is detained. They can do so by doing the following. Call ICE at one of the numbers listed on this slide. 619-671-8700 for San Diego, 760-618-7200 for Imperial, and 1-888-351-4024 for National. In some cases, detainees are taken to facilities outside of San Diego or California, hence the 1-800 number. To use the ICE Online Detainee Locator, Visit https://locator.ice.gov. For the detainee locator, try variations of the full name and country of origin. Detainee information is usually posted within 3 days. Unblock your phone lines and your phone settings to receive collect calls from detention centers. Friends and family should visit detention facilities only if they have legal status. On this slide, you'll find important phone numbers which are useful for loved ones of a detained individual. Remember that family and friends can help a loved one in detention by doing the following. Immediately contacting an immigration attorney. You can find a licensed immigration attorney by searching the California State Bar's website or your county's legal referral service. Be wary of consulting with notaries or notarios, as they are not permitted to provide legal advice. Calling the Immigrant Rights Legal Defense Program at 619-446-2883, Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Calling the Immigration Legal Service Coalition at 858-751-7553, Monday through Friday between 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. Services provided include legal consultations, know your rights education, short-term legal representation for people detained by immigration enforcement, and referral to service providers offering long-term representation. The ACLU-SDIC Immigrants Rights Resource Hub provides a list of pro bono resources, know your rights information, including printable resources and videos, and guidance for sensitive locations during immigration enforcement activities. Scan the QR code on the screen or visit bit.ly/Immigrant Resource Hub. Check it out, get informed, and share it with your community. Knowledge is power. Spread the word.